Saturday, everyone. Hope everyone's enjoying a great weekend. Thank you all for jumping on. It's the Left Fresh Podcast, hip hop episode. Um, Happy Saturday, everyone. Hope everyone's enjoying their weekend. I'll say it again. If you're jumping on for the first time, I want to encourage you to subscribe, like, share, tell a friend, comment. Please jump in and engage in this. I got good conversations, a good episode for tonight. Got some good segments, good music to dive into and discuss. Um, Not going to waste too much time. Like I said, let everybody settle in and everything like that. Hope everyone is enjoying their weekend festivities. Hope just getting in, relax myself. Going through some old music and reviewing some stuff and getting ready for discuss some of the great things that are happening in hip hop throughout the week since the last episode. Um, Most importantly, I'm gonna start off with one of the key things that's being talked about this week. Um, Ti and 50. Yeah, this past week, there's been a lot of Ti and 50 back and forth. Not so much as far as music on 50's and just more or less petty. And then Ti's been kind of just 50's petty antics have riled up Ti and set him off on a 3 diss song streak for the week, along with an upcoming album coming out. Young King got involved in the petty, and Damani even jumped out and came up with a song for Miss Jackson and everything like that. So yeah, it's been an active week for the Harris family. Everybody's been going on. What's going on, James Smith? Yeah, 50 losing his audience. Yeah, because it's like that's kind of one of the dynamics with 50. He is an entertaining person. He's pretty charismatic. He has a sense of humor and everything. He can be funny at times. He can also rub people the wrong way. One thing is he is consistent to who he is. He just kind of, to a certain extent, he gets to a point where he'll piss everybody off, and that's kind of just, he's willing to live with that. That's kind of, you know, uh, he's willing to embrace the good and bad of himself. You know what I mean? And it's like, he understands that engagement is the key thing to win on the internet too. So it's like he's definitely gonna get in there, get in the mix, say some stuff that's gonna rile everybody up, ruffle feathers, and live with the results and watch the boom. So and, part of the boom, low blow to bring up his wife, and all it was about was the verses. Yeah, this is what kind of like I wanted to jump in and discuss. Kind of like one of my first and last only time really addressing Ti and 50 because it's kind of like a much ado about nothing at this point. I mean, Ti's making music, 50 making memes, but one of the things I really wanted to discuss was not so much them. I feel like everything they did is kind of along the course. 50 does something petty, Ti responds. You know, Everything that kind of happened is kind of like, well, what do you expect? Kind of with me, I'm not really so much surprised about that. What I'm more or less looking at throughout the course of this week, and if I'm on sites and blogs or just different things or just different whatever um interactions people have online, whatever discussions and posts I've seen and everything like that. I'll look at the comments, I'll look at people's opinions and everything like that. And it's like, the discourse between people or fans, shall I say, most importantly, fans, is kind of the funny part to me. That's kind of what I wanted to discuss when having this conversation because I feel like what 50 and Ti got going on is kind of like back and forth. It's kind of like just typical rapper stuff. You know, Two artists that were very key in the 2000s era. In the era they came from about 20 years ago, there was a time where Ti was red hot. There was a time where 50 was red hot. And it's like throughout this discussion, it's like I think everybody's kind of losing sight of that to make their point or to make their case, where really both sides would really have a case because it's very important that we do keep in sight that this stem from a versus challenge, although it didn't really stem from a versus challenge. You know what I mean? Like the blow up from this immediate situation was a versus challenge. It was the discussion of a versus. Ti challenged 50 to a versus. Ti said that it was understood that 50 would do the verses, and then once Ti brought it up publicly, 50 backed out, and 50 provided his reasons that it wouldn't be strategical because he felt like versus was good when everybody was inside, everybody's outside now, so he didn't think the challenge was good at this point. You know what I mean? I guess he felt that Ti would issue the challenge right during the pandemic when everybody was inside But once it was outside or everybody's outside, 50 didn't see the value in it anymore. But Ti wanted smoke. Period. Um, I think historically people lost that there's a timeline of this even before verses. Um, 50 going at Ti is not new. Um, it may have been a time where 50's peak was kind of behind him. If you kind of go back to like around 2008, maybe 2009, I want to say around that range. The Beg for Mercy album where 50 made a shot at Ti as far as Ti's court cases and his legal issues. Um, Folks still watching verses and Tip accident too. Yeah, I know. I think Ti asked in 2021, and verses we were out of the pandemic by then. We wasn't inside anymore. That's what 50 was kind of rebuttal. Like, you waited till 2021 to ask me. I don't think it's good because everybody's outside now. But to your point, folks are still watching verses though, which is a very good point though. I mean, like I agree that people are still watching verses, so it's like there's no reason for people to really just for 50 to really reject it. He just probably just doesn't want to do it. People saying 50 scared, you know what I mean? And then it's like 50 responds with the petty stuff, and it's like and then it leads to the personal attacks, and then Ti comes back with the diss records and everything like that, which is understandable. Like I said, you're a rapper, why not come back to a rap? Go back to your rap thing. And some people saying 50 doesn't have to rap. Uh, doesn't have to rap, but it's being looked at against him. I don't care how you look at it. And it's weird because here in New Yorkers say 50 doesn't have to rap. You're a New Yorker, everybody raps. I wouldn't see 50 doing that unless he had some sort of ownership stake. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you know, 50 wants to be as strategic as he can be when it comes to these. I don't think that he's really gung ho about doing it based on who's it with and everything like that. 50's real big on who people align with as well. So I mean, he probably doesn't see anything strategic in it. I don't. I think people would kill to see it. I mean, people would really definitely love to see it. And but one of the things is just like I said, the discourse between people going back and forth is that you see one side saying, "Oh, this one would kill the other one." Is like, no, not necessarily. Um, One of the things we lose sight of with verses is not a tally of who got the most hits. I mean, honestly, Ti has the most extensive discography just off a tally. Um, but you only need 20 songs. And 50's got a limited catalog. He does. He has a way limited catalog. Ti. He just doesn't have the amount of music, just the amount. People are debating quality though. People are saying Get Rich or Die Trying and The Massacre is the best albums between them. I don't necessarily agree with that either. I think personally, both of them drop quality music. I mean, that's the reality of it. They both have dropped quality music. They both have dropped music a little past their prime years, their prime industry years. I'm a firm believer in like people really just don't really fall off like that. People just kind of lose the popularity contest. I think 50 made some pretty decent music after his peak popularity kind of felt dwindled a little bit. I think Ti's still made some quality songs too, even after his peak popularity dwindled a little bit. We as hip hop listeners, we kind of make popularity contests for people as opposed to just listening to the actual music and just being objective. One dynamic with 50 and Ti is just the regional dynamic. You know, I'm not surprised if a Southerner thinks Ti has better music than 50. I'm not surprised if a New Yorker thinks 50 has better music than Ti. I don't. I'm not surprised by that. We're hip hop listeners are all prone to regional bias. Very few are objective like that. Objectively speaking, they definitely got enough for verses hypothetically. You know what I mean? It would be a matter of what songs they would pick. If it's strategical enough to actually win. I mean, they both got enough bangers though. They both meet the requirements to have a versus. So it would just be a matter of strategy as far as what songs we would play. But yeah, I mean, it's like you know, reasonably thinking, it's like 50 had a peak run, and it was in the 2000s. It was around 2003 when Get Rich or Die Trying dropped. Uh, he followed up with the Massacre. I don't think anybody would kind of debate the Massacre as good, but it was still a pretty quality album. It just probably wasn't the same luster as Get Rich or Die Trying. I will say I think Get Rich or Die Trying, as great as the album as it is, I think the actual I'm not saying it was meant to be a gimmick, but the actual lure of 50 Cent, his story had a lot to do with that album really going through the roof like that because I think the Massacre was probably just as good as Get Rich or Die Trying. I think they were both pretty much the same album. I mean, the production was a little bit different. The sound was a little different. I think the Massacre's production might have been a little bit smoother. Let me pull up 50's catalog real quick. Yeah, first two albums, I think that's when the hype was real. You know what I mean? Like when 50's hype was real, it was like those first two albums, that Get Rich or Die Trying, that Massacre album, because Get Rich or Die Trying, like I said, the story that led up to it, the beef with Ja Rule, signing with Eminem and Dr. Dre, that really pushed 50 through the door. Then you got the Massacre. The anticipation of the Massacre being a follow up to Get Rich or Die Trying, um, it actually lived up to it. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think the Massacre, low key, unpopular opinion, is probably just as good as Get Rich or Die Trying. I think that it just kind of lost the story of it. 50 story being well known just kind of just took away from the Massacre, where the Massacre might have been better produced. It might have been just as good as production wise. I mean, Dr. Dre did his thing on, and everybody else that jumped on Get Rich or Die Trying. No disrespect to them, but the Massacre has some really underrated production. Yeah, like you said, Jay, like you said, Jimmy, G Unit albums were pretty good during that time when they had Lloyd Banks and Young Buck. I mean, yeah, they had some. They had some. I like the Massacre more. Yeah, the Massacre was actually really smooth. Like it was a really smooth album musically. You know what I mean? I think Get Rich or Die Trying had the lure and the hard hitting factor and everything like that. But the Massacre was actually a pretty smooth project. Um, Curtis, before I self-destruct, you see, before I self-destruct on the lower right there for some who probably kind of lost touch with 50 music after that. And then the very last album actually was Animal Ambition. That was released in 2014. See, that's kind of when the popularity of everything kind of tapered off. I remember he kind of lost that little bet with Kanye about who would sell more albums with Curtis and the graduation and the graduation one. And 50 continued to still kind of make music, but it was kind of like more sparingly since then. I kind of like felt like 50 was kind of transitioning to other ventures than music once he did Curtis. Other albums is just, like I said, 50 still knows the formula to how to make a song, how to make an album. He's been kind of having that formula. Yeah, Get Rich or Die Trying was a good label, had Total Control album. And you could tell the Massacre once he started putting more of himself in it. Yeah, I mean, the Massacre was more of like smooth music, him having access to the right resource. He felt more seasoned on the Massacre. Whereas Get Rich or Die Trying was just more hard hitting because, he just came out and he just really hit the streets. And then for real hip hop heads, this is the 50 I knew. It's the 50 I kind of grew up on. $10, 3 for $10 mixtapes, and you will get 50 Cent, pushing this stuff way out. And this is the humble beginnings of 50 Cent right here. Power of a Dollar. 50 Cent is the future. Guess who's back? The G Unit, No Mercy, No Fear collection edition right here. This is Hungry 50. This is something I feel like a lot of 50's core fan base is always going to hang on to. Um, Even when his music got really really commercial and everything, we this is kind of where we this is where the core 50 fans kind of hang on to. And he had a connection with a core fan base, and it's like it's gonna be hard to deter people away from that. Even with the antics that he pulls, people are still going to be fans of 50, especially people are just kind of really sticking by the region on this one as well too. I think a lot of New Yorkers are really clinging to 50, even when he's lost favor with other New York artists they like. You know what I mean? So, I mean, like I said, I feel like there's a lot of bias in a lot of these arguments, but I mean, there's really no denying what 50 did, you know, from his mixtape in the early 2000s run. I mean, like people say, peak 50, one of the highest peaks in hip hop. Um, you know, we look at him and see antics right now and everything like that, but I mean, that's one of the things he's usually flexing about on this page is like his work, what he's actually done. But, you know, I don't think this is an easy kill either way if you put the right 20 songs up against each other. Because I mean, in the other corner, you got T.I., who also has made his mark. I mean, like I said, the discography to pick from in a versus, T.I. got way more to pick from. 50 got some hits that he can definitely pull from. But I mean, Ti can go kind of a bunch of different directions on these. I mean, he could pull out stuff that's kind of unfamiliar to the listener, that people haven't heard in a while. I mean, if you kind of go back to if you go back to I'm Serious, trap music, Urban Legend, those albums didn't really hit the highest level of commercial success, but in hip hop listeners' ears, those are kind of the glory years of Ti. Uh, King album was like the pinnacle. I think 2006. I don't think anybody had a bigger 2006 than Ti. King album came out, and ATL the movie. He was on top of the charts for like almost most of the year. Ti was pretty much at that point like pretty much almost the best in the game. He probably had the best year of anybody did in 2006. And to really kind of drive that home, you know, the massacre already pretty much dropped by the time King came out. By the time King came out, the massacre already came out. I got to point this out and be objective. This is kind of where New York kind of fell off at. That 2000s, mid 2000, 2006. Like, because if you think about it, Get Rich or Die Trying is probably the last class. Probably the last classic album of the 2000s that came out of New York. New York was in a weak state at that point. This was at that point where kind of Ti and Lil Wayne, um, Luda was still kind of there. And remember, Luda was kind of taking off in the early 2000s as well. He was always one of them too. He just wasn't at the very top of the top, but he was always amongst them in the early 2000s. That was ludicrous. Then like I said, kind of Ti just took off and got real popular as well. Um, let's not forget during this time as well, mixtape Ti. Ti was one of the first ones to work with DJ Drama and really get the mixtape scene popping in Atlanta. He had the Gangsta Grills down with the King, where he kind of just decimated Lil Flip. Um, Ti at his peak, had another one who had a high peak. There's some similarities with Ti and 50 Cent. When they hit, they came out and they came out hot. Um, how long did they stay hot? Man, that remains to be seen. I mean, Ti dropped, like I said, he dropped many more albums. After his legal troubles and kind of been in the game a little while longer. I think Ti and 50, Ti dropped way more music in the 2010s than 50 did. 50 just dropped one album in the 2010s. Ti continued dropping music later on. Um, how popular his music was versus the early 2000s, not really much as close, but I mean, he had a lot of appearances on these albums though. You know, Heavy is the Head, Trouble Man, that album had Dre 3000, dropped that classic verse. Yeah, that Trouble Man album had that classic Dre 3000. I'm Sorry on there. He had numerous features. No Mercy had features on there. He had songs with Chris Brown and everything like that. Ti was dropping music, a lot of music, a high volume of music. And then even if you go even further into his discography later on, you got albums from 2016, 2018, even the Libra in 2020 had a song with Damani and everything on there. Like I said, Ti's range of popularity wasn't the same as the mid 2000s, but during that 2000s period, Ti, you know, one of the top artists in that mix. I mean, easily. So, like, when people get into these comparisons between 50 and Ti, it's like they're both great in their own right. And I understand people for actually wanting the verses because, like I said, the right 20 songs between them, I mean, they can have an incredible verses. I mean, they could have possibly had one of the best verses. I mean, depending on the venue, depending on the, like I said, the structure and the format. Like I said, 20 songs. Yeah, 50 definitely got 20 songs. Ti definitely got 20 songs. People are delusional. I think people just want to be right online. People want to argue. And then they start the other mudslinging. About the street credibility and the image and everything like that. Listen, street credibility ain't did nothing but get artists locked up. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, whether it's somebody who's really in the streets or not, that's cool. But you got to actually make music, which is kind of what Ti's point was, and which is everybody asking 50 to do is make music. And why are we asking you to make music? Because you made great music. We weren't asking you to make great music if you wasn't. Um, was it all great? No. Was all Ti music great? No. Neither one of them had. Both of them had some music that wasn't. That, you could have kept in the draft. They just had music that at their peak was some of the best. So, I mean, I understood the logic of Ti basically calling 50 out, and not from the regional aspect. I think Ti kind of called it out from the point of Yeah, pardon me, I had a little trouble right there. But yeah, basically from the angle that you know, Ti calling 50 out was a good angle because you actually have two artists at the same time period, very close to each other, that was making some of the best music at that time. So, from the regional aspect, of course, everybody's gonna be invested in their region being great. You know, it was kind of at a very in between point. Like New York was still making great music, Atlanta was still making great music. So I understand how, you know, a lot of people get emotionally invested in it, get regionally invested in it. But honestly, I think that you know it would have been honestly great. I think a lot of these discussions is kind of like you can just put that in the middle somewhere. Um, like I said, two legends, especially 20 years later. You look at the music now, King ain't letting up. Yeah, yeah. It's good. He should have just said that. And like I said, I'm surprised that you know many people will say 50 doesn't have to rap because 50 is somebody who likes to push the button, likes to push the envelope. Um, and Ti's never wanted to back down or shy away from it, shy away from smoke either. You know what I mean? Which is always what I respected about him. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter who it is, he's gonna go at you, and that's always that's always good for the competitive part of the hip hop fans and the listeners. But yeah, I just jumped on here to say, hey, it's probably time to just appreciate both sides of it, appreciate both of their music. Um, you can debate about it all you want to, but you can debate, but you can't deny. Um, all the other sidebar stuff and all the personal attacks and everything like that, that's cool and all that. But I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, I'm here to be objective, and objectively, they were both great. You know what I mean? Um, I see Damani getting in it. I see King getting in it. But I think Ti's music speaks for itself. I think 50's music speaks for itself. One of the most important things is Ti got an album getting ready to come out as well. Um, it drew my anticipation as well. Listen to Ti's album. A lot of people are trying to just say, "Oh well," but that's why because Ti's doing it for clout. And I'm like, I don't think Ti necessarily needed it for clout. Ti single was already building that type of clout. Versus came out because of COVID when globally the world was locked down. So who would stand a chance if Versus with Ti and 50 went global? Not North versus South, like or time lapse. Yeah, I mean, I think a Versus, it kind of had, Master P and No Limit versus Cash Money showed that you can actually build a buzz for a Versus after the pandemic. Um, the question is how it will come together because that's kind of the presentation. I felt like not having Lil Wayne on there kind of really put a damper on it. I think you kind of felt like you was a couple hot boys short, and it really kind of dampened it a little bit. And you're kind of missing some No Limit people as well. But at the end of the day, you can pull the idea of versus. I think is people have it in their minds versus what's really going to turn out, and then the venue is important as well. A lot of different factors. Yeah. The verses is for the fans. Just do it if it fifth so we can vibe. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of it is too. Like, if 50 should have enough of a demand. I think 50 should see enough of the demand, like, come on, do it, bro, do it. But I mean, at the end of the day, because I mean, yeah, I know you got shows and movies and everything like that, but man, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can drop a verse. But yeah, I mean, people have the constant fighting and arguing online and everything like that. And it's like, oh man, 50 will smoke Ti. Ti will smoke 50. No, they won't. They'll go back and forth, which is why everybody's on both sides of the fence saying one or the other. This is why it's such a mixed opinion. It's not as cut and dry as everybody want to make it out to be and everything like that. Both artists accomplishing a lot. And then both of them are great songwriters. 50 and Ti, both great songwriters. They are great songwriters. 50 wrote many songs for on R&B and hip hop. So is Ti. They both found artists. They both have accomplished a lot. They both do things off the mic. People like, oh, people talk about Ti going at 50 like, oh, Ti broke or something. No, Ti got money too. What I mean, they both got money. They both accomplished a lot in the hip hop game. They both, like I said, legends of their era. So I mean, a lot of that discourse is just a lot of just people saying anything online. I mean, it's almost like, I almost didn't feel right addressing troll bait. I mean, rage bait and trolling and everything like that. But I mean, it's just funny to talk about. But I mean, yeah, just to clarify things though, both artists I feel like should be appreciated for what they've done. But yeah, everybody that's just jumping on, I'd like to encourage you all once again to subscribe, like, make sure your notifications are turned on, just the way you know I'm recording. I record on Wednesdays. My sports segments, my sports hip hop, my sports episodes is on Wednesdays. My hip hop episodes is on Saturdays, like right now that you're on with. I get a lot of in-depth hip hop coverage from the commercial to the underground to, I try to stay out of the news and blog and stuff, but just kind of focus on just the music and everything because there's a lot of good music flying under the radar. But some things are just worth talking about in order to get to the certain points. So, yeah, I mean, entertaining this week. You know what I'm saying? We needed it. January and February been some pretty good releases this month. These first 2 months of the year, not too heavy in volume. Not too much anticipated as far as this year, but albums get dropped all the time. Our artists are constantly working, so you know. But February itself was a particularly good month as you go back and visit. I think there was some quality releases I like to revisit, and some of them were pretty short, but some of them were nice and sweet. Um, I like to go back through the ones I seen, and most of them starting off the month was Mickey Diamond and Big Ghost. Like I said, I still revisit this one. This one has some nice gutter production, nice gutter gangster rap. Mickey Diamond from the Detroit area, making quality music. He's been out for it's about I want to say 7, 8 years. Kind of took a little hiatus last year, but came back strong in this February edition right here to start the month. Um, did really good, did a really good job. Like I said, again with Big Ghost, they make a great combination. Like I said, if you're into the hardcore hip hop a little bit, a little more of a remnant of stuff that we kind of grew up on, maybe in that late '90s, 2000s era. Um, More or less in a modernized form. Yeah, you gotta check that Mickey Diamond out. I definitely liked it. Like I said, I keep revisiting it myself. Uh, Definitely a dope project. And also like to go to our one of the key highlight releases of this month, J. Cole to Fall Off. Everybody pretty much had rave reviews about this. Everybody wanted to see what Cole had to say, pretty much from the backlash of the whole, not say beef, but the whole kind of diss track backing out with Kendrick Lamar and not getting involved with the big three as far as, you know, being part of the big three and getting in the mix with Drake and Kendrick. J. Cole kind of backed out and, you know, kind of took some time off a little bit and he dropped some teasers for some new music and finally dropped this one this month too, The Fall Off. I still go back and visit a couple of these. Like I said, like I reviewed it a couple of weeks ago. I feel like there was of different, a lot of different songs, some of which may have not been necessary for this album. A lot of songs on this album, over 20. I want to say about 26. I want to say 24 songs. But overall, it was a solid project, though. I mean, it was you know, definitely something to give us that lets us know that hey, J. Cole's still a premier artist despite the fallout from not jumping in the mix with Kendrick and Drake. But it was a pretty solid album. Like I said, another great installment that was added to this month. I definitely appreciated it. Um, yeah, and that was a pretty cool joint though. Another one that came out around February 20th, ESTG and Mozzy. ESTG is, if you don't know, Yo Gotti's artist. Mozzy, another dope artist. They came together and collaborated for this project. Um, it was pretty good. It was pretty good, solid project too. I wasn't surprised because like they've done pretty good, solid projects on their own. So them coming together and they've done features with each other as well. So overall project with them turned out pretty well. The first track, it's 12 tracks on there. The first one, Wouldn't Hold You Up. Yeah, that one took me from the first go. Yeah, I was definitely feeling this one as soon as I played the first track. The breakdown came in. And I was like, yeah, this one's tough right here. Yeah, I was definitely feeling this one right here. This was definitely a very tough first track, and then not me. The second track, yeah, the first couple tracks was real good, man. I was like, man, I was like, I was going off the first seven. I want to say, 12 tracks though. I mean, like I said, I had a hard time really skipping some of them. Some of them, I mean, I might not revisit again, but I was very impressed with this Mozzy and ESTG album right here. This was definitely a good project. Definitely looking forward to more work from them. Maybe they make another project or follow up. This was actually really good. I mean, not saying surprising knowing their work, but in an era where a lot of great artists are linking up and doing projects, I was definitely feeling this one. I mean, I gotta go ahead and check that one out too. Um, Another great release from this month, revisiting Larry June, Currency, and Alchemist from last week. Like I said, smooth sound. Might have been a little too smooth for some people's taste, but I feel like Larry June, Currency, and Alchemist put together a nice, soothing sound for the album. Like I said, wasn't a lot of songs on this project either, um, which is kind of like I want to say the kind of the new moniker is kind of like making these short albums, but they're pretty smooth though. I mean, like I said, 7 tracks. Um, I liked it. Wouldn't say I was completely all the way blown through the roof by it. I've heard songs with them before, and I definitely thought that it would have been one, just a little more of a diversity. I think some of the songs kind of started. I mean, for 7 songs, I mean, some of them sound a little too similar to be for so little songs on the album. But I mean, the vibe was just smooth. Though. Alchemist, great production. Larry June, smooth flow. Currency, he gave you some nice slick talk in there as well. So I mean, it was another quality release. I was impressed with February, and then also another short but sweet project, Boldy James and Ransom. This one was another 7 songs. Another one that was very good with the bars. Nicholas Craven had great had great production on this one. He found, he worked well with Boldy James. I was wondering how Ransom was going to jump on the track as well. He did his part as well. I felt like this one, like I said, another 7 song one. There's like 3 7-song albums that came out this month, and they had two. There was a duo on there, and Boldy's on 2 out of the 3. But yeah, Boldy got busy. Like I said, he went on a crazy run last year where he dropped like 6 albums in 6 months. I mean, he was wondering how was he going to how was he going to rebound from last year? And I mean, it looked like he's picking up where he left off at. I mean, he's doing collabos, jumping on tracks with different producers again. Yeah, I liked it though. I mean, I like this one as well. Like I said, I like the ones in February. These are the ones that kind of stuck out to me the most. Um, he followed up this past Friday with another album with Rome Streetz on here. Now, Rome Streetz is somewhat similar in the same lane as Ransom, but a completely different delivery, completely different style. But I like the way it complimented Boldy James. Boldy kind of works well with a little bit of everybody. He's on a lot of features like Griselda. Worked with Alchemist a lot as well. Him jumping on, working with Ransom earlier this year, then they following right back up the same month, working with Rome Streets. So that's combined 14 songs that he's had 2 different projects in this month. Shout out to Boldy James. He's been busy. I was definitely feeling it. These both of these projects, especially in the beginnings, I like the way when you start an album off, it's like how you really get to tune the listener in, and he's done a great job. All of these projects have done a pretty good job of tuning the listener in as soon as you first play it, and then whether there's enough songs or enough singles that you want to keep going through, that's on you. But I feel like the actual beginnings of these albums so far that I went through are actually pretty good. Actually pretty good, and thoroughly impressed with them. Like I said, February not too busy, but busy enough. Like I said, I can at least where it's not like a lot of volume of song, not a volume of albums, and not a volume of music that I'm used to. Because sometimes you have weeks where it's like 3 or 4 different albums get released on a Friday. So far these past couple weeks, I probably had like 1 or 2 that kind of stuck out to me that I went back and visited and I listened to. Um, you all are welcome to jump in the comments and suggest any music that you come across, anything like that as well. I love the engagement. But yeah, I run across these albums and I post them in here just because I know people that like the same type of music I like and everything of that nature as well. And I like music from almost any era, any time, any region, doesn't matter. So yeah, shout out to Boldy James, another Detroit artist like Mickey Diamond, Rome Streets, Nas artist, um, Mass Appeal. Nas really backing him. One of the best young, not so much young, pretty much my age, but one of the best artists in New York. Kind of like that middle aged lane of hip hop artists. Like I said, that grungy late '90s, 2000s sound, mixed with Boldy, with the production that they have right here. I mean, I was feeling this, especially this. Like I said, this came out yesterday. You all can check that out as well. Boldy James and Rome Streets. The album name is Manhunt. Um, yeah, the Cole album was okay, but I feel like if you ain't dressing when it happened, I don't want to hear. Yeah, um, he tried to go on and just make a rest of the album. Like I feel like there was like 2 or 3 songs that addressed it. The rest of the album out of 24, well, not bad. He still kind of made albums about his hometown, his story and everything like that. I was kind of, I was feeling some of the songs, and some of his storytelling was really good. I had to give that credit to him. I think his storytelling on his album was really good. I think this was actually some of the best storytelling now that I revisit it. He's had some really good stories throughout his career, but this one right here definitely had some quality storytelling on here that I felt like gets overlooked in worrying about whether he's addressing the feud with Kendrick and Drake and everything like that. I don't want that to get lost in it because he actually made a pretty good album. Like I said, it just the penalty was kind of having too many songs, but I also feel like having a lot of songs kind of guarantees that you don't have any songs that anybody like. So I mean, at that point, I kind of like take the good with the bad. But like I said, yeah, J Cole had a pretty solid album. Um, like I said, and then back to Boldy, you know, he's been busy. One of the hardest working out artists in the game. Jay Z kind of shouted him out before a couple years back. Like I said, Alchemist has worked with him before. Griselda's worked with him before. He's kind of worked with everybody. So seeing 2 projects in 1 month is kind of like typical of Boldy, considering last year. Because I mean, he had like 6 albums released from January to July, and that's no lie. Like literally 6 albums at that point. You kind of wonder if he was gonna wear himself thin, but he kind of just never lost it. You know what I mean? So yeah, he's kind of just keeping low to the pavement, just keep pounding out new music. So yeah, I went through Mickey Diamond, I went through Boldy, I went through J. Cole, I went to ESTG and Mozzy. Um, Don Tripp had the deluxe edition of Forgiveness is God's Job, Part 2. Oh yeah, anything with Ransom will never be a miss. Yeah, Ransom is incredible. Yeah, before I go back to the Don Trip, yeah, Ransom is another one. He went on a run last year as well. He dropped about 4 albums, about 4 or 5 albums. He had one with Dave East. He had like 2 or 3 of himself. He worked with Conway the Machine like at the end of 2024. Like Ransom has been on an incredible run since 2020. Like I said, a lot of these artists in the streaming era are just flooding the market. I mean, the older rappers, the underground rappers, the rappers that are not like always in the limelight or backed by mainstream labels. Um, they just all over the streaming era and the streaming platforms and everything like that, just releasing quality music. Back in the day, these would probably be mixtapes that I would go buy. Whereas like they got whole albums that they're just dropping nonstop, and it's like even if you don't like the whole project, you're gonna find at least 2 or 3 songs on them that you're gonna keep in your rotation, and that's what I usually aim for. Like, I'm not even looking for so much classics. With this much flood of music, I would, just I can just grab so many singles and just compile a playlist of them and just go from there. Same thing with Don Tripp. The Forgiveness is God's Job Part 2. This is the follow up from his album that he dropped around November or December of last year. Um, this one here is not short on songs. He had 23 songs on this one. Like I said, when you got this many songs, it's almost impossible to find a song that you don't like. So I actually, going back through this one and the first one, um, for those who don't know, Don Tripp is was part of the legendary 2010s duo from Tennessee, Don Tripp and Starlito. Um, Don Tripp kind of went on his own kind of run for the past 6 or 7 years, where he was dropping. At one point, he was dropping an album a month as well. Um, Music is dope, great rhymes, great punchlines, great beats. Tennessee style, real hard Southern rap. You know what I mean? Like another one, just flying under the radar. I'm not sure if people remember Don Tripp from his earlier days. I believe he was signed with Yo Gotti at one point, or just kind of affiliated with Yo Gotti at some point. But yeah, he went on that run with Don Tripp and Starlito as part of that duo, legendary at this point. And then he just continued on his run solo throughout the 2020s as well. Definitely likes Don Tripp's music. Dropped another project this month as well. So yeah, it was a busy February. Definitely a busy February. Like I said, yeah, Mickey Diamond, J. Cole, ESCG and Mozzy, Boldy James, Boldy again, Don Tripp. Like I said, Larry June. Like I said, it was. I mean, I've seen busier months, but it's still a busy February, nevertheless. And like in January, it was still impressing me as well. So I like where this 2026 is going. Like I said, kind of give me time to catch up on 2025 music as well. Um, Next Saturday, if there's a slow on releases, definitely gonna revisit some of those 2025 albums. Gonna have some of those revisiting legendary albums, looking for some more anniversaries as well. But also another track, not so much album was released yesterday, but a track. And those from the Atlanta area, those who are familiar with Kanye West and artists that was once signed to him, or just underground hip hop in general, got Sci the Prince. Sci warned everyone of a diss track that he had aimed at J. Cole. And yesterday he dropped it. It's called BRA Lost Control. Sci the Prince is back after, he's been dropping verses here and there and everything like that for the last couple years, but not a real album necessarily. Like I said, he was affiliated with Kanye for a while. Um, Came back addressing, college dropouts that became lyricists, where he came from the era of street dudes that were lyricists. And, everybody kind of felt that he was alluding to J. Cole, and he said that he wasn't. But since you mentioned it, um, he was going to go at J. Cole, and he ended up making this diss track called Lost Control right here. Um, a lot of people are wondering what's the angle for it. Um, And I read somewhere that there was a line with J. Cole made on the song about Kanye having yes men around him, and I believe this is when Saha was signed to them. I'm not sure if that's the reason why per se. Like I said, I'm not trying to blog about it, but um, Saha got words for J. Cole. Was kind of talking to him for a minute. I want to see if J. Cole is actually going to respond or even entertain it. Um, that's one thing about this era that we're in now is, like, when we discuss a big three, there's a lot of talent around here. Like I said, we look in the streaming era and you look at artists, there's real spitters out here, there's real lyricists out here, and there's real dope music out here. But kind of it stems back to the 50 and Ti era, where a lot of dope artists kind of flew under the radar. A lot of artists got a little more recognition than the other artists. Um, J. Cole gets a lot of recognition for being a dope lyricist, but Sahara the Prince is also a dope lyricist. All right. Regardless of whether people like the angle that he's coming from or not, he's also a dope lyricist. There's a lot of dope lyricists out here that hip hop fans know of, but maybe the casual listener doesn't really listen to. Um, Saha is kind of in that category of a Lupe Fiasco. Um, Guys who really got bars. Um, just maybe been out of the limelight for a minute, maybe doesn't have enough songs or bangers, anything like that, but still made substantial albums. Um, Sounds like dissing J. Cole for a buzz because you were a yes. Were you a yes man? Now, I think the case with I don't think J. Cole necessarily may have been referring to Sci-Hi. He might have been referring to Pusha T, could have been referring to, Big Sean. I'm not sure who necessarily is referring to. Even if he was referring to an artist, I'm not even sure if Kanye even knows. I mean, if J. Cole was even referring to him, I'm not even sure if Sci even knows he's referring to him. I think he's kind of taking it as such. Um, it's kind of entertaining, nevertheless. I think that it's going to come to a head. I'm not sure if J. Cole's actually going to come out and entertain it or not. I'm not sure if Sci is going to keep it continued. Um, if he's just gonna leave it at that, it's definitely entertainment. Like I said, everybody wants to get in, and I believe Simba, another artist who may have had some album coming out, and I believe there may have been talk about him going at J. Cole as well. I think a lot of artists are kind of just really competitive. A lot of artists feel like they're the best. There's a lot of talent out here. There's a lot of guys who feel like they can spit bars, and they feel like and especially when we get to the 30 and 40-year-old range, like the older rappers, like getting towards everybody's saying nobody wants to see anybody in their 50s rap, but the 20-year-olds, they're not really rapping at each other. It's usually the 30-year-olds who still rapping and really competitive. Um, Come from that era of, like I said, 1,000 disc records all over the place. And, at the end of the day, too, I think people got to keep in sight that you got to, like one of the points people hate about with 50 makers that you got to be able to make music too. And it's like, yeah, you got to be able to make music too, which is kind of like what J. Cole was continuing to do. He was continuing to make music as well. He didn't. That's kind of one of the things I applaud about him is that if you're gonna get out of the beef, kind of just stay out of the I'm the best conversation and just continue to make music because people will like your music rather than your lyrical superiority. People will say, "Oh yeah, this dude can rap better than so and so," but this person makes better music. And that's kind of like going back to 50. What made people like 50? 50. I don't think there was ever a point where people said 50 was one of the dopest lyrically ever. I think the thing was he had a formula for making hit songs, which was his hooks, which was his beat selection, and just all the components that make a song come together. This is somebody that trained with Jam Master Jay. Um, Same thing, T.I. had a formula as well. You know, but same thing with J. Cole and Kendrick and Drake and everything like that, all the way stemming down to them, is that you got artists that can rap and do LA Leakers freestyles all day long, can do Funk Flex freestyles all day long, and then you got artists that can actually make songs that can actually make music, you know. And like when I'm listening to a lot of these artists in the streaming era, the Boldy James and the Ransoms and the Jake, and I'm listening to a lot of these guys, they making quality music as well. These are not just LA Leakers freestyles type of people. So it's like you have that balance of, you know, can you make a song? Can you spit bars? And Sci is one of those artists as well who can also make an album. He had an album called No Dope on Sundays, which is still gets a lot of replay value. I'm not sure how much recognition did it get, but it definitely, for those in hip hop know, like they know that album, that No Dope on Sundays was actually a good album from Sci to Prince. So, it's not like he's not worthy competition or anything like that. He is worthy competition. I think the reason I think people are questioning is the authenticity of his his reasoning, his motives for getting at J. Cole. I think that's what a lot of people are kind of questioning is his motives for getting at J. Cole. Are they authentic or are you just looking for clout to showcase your ability? And like I said, if those who actually go and listen to his music, go listen to No Dope on Sunday. His music is up to par. Okay, Sci the Prince was always up there with some of the best. I kind of put him up there as one of those underrated artists because we do put a lot of attention on the big three. We do look at J. Cole, we do look at Kendrick, we do look at Drake, and there's Freddie Gibbs, there's Big Crit out there, you know, there's a whole bunch of different artists out here making dope music all over the place. And it's not just, artists that are just showcased by, like I said, artists, people that you gotta understand those are machines behind Drake. Those are machines behind, Kendrick Lamar that pushed them like that. Those are moguls and execs that, put a lot behind them. Meanwhile, a lot of other artists are getting it out the mud, independently. They got label assistants, but it's not major. You know what I mean? And it's like, thank you to the streaming era because you can go back and you can go and listen to some of these artists' music and say, hey, there's a lot of music out here. There's a lot of quality music out here. And like outside of you know, the songs I just put out there, a lot of the underground songs that just came out of release, it was actually a pretty slow month without it. But with that extra volume of music that's flying under the radar out here, it was actually a pretty good month of February, along with the headlines and the blogs and everything involving T.I. and 52. But yeah, some pretty good music flew under the radar. The first 2 months has been pretty good. I'm looking forward to March as well. And I'll be looking forward to showing you new music and everything else in March. But yeah, that's my time for tonight. I appreciate you all for jumping on. It's the Left Fresh podcast. You can find me on Instagram. This is Left Fresh. You can find me on TikTok. This is Left Fresh. You can find me on Wednesdays at 8:30 discussing sports. You can find me on Saturdays right now at 9 p.m. discussing hip hop. Appreciate you all. Like I said, subscribe, like, comment, share, tell a friend to tell a friend. I appreciate you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. I'm gonna say it again. I appreciate you. All right. You all have a great weekend. And like I said, check out some of that music I put out here. Go back to the show again if you need to see the replays and everything like that. You can jump in the comments and engage. I have some more polls and everything on the channel for everyone to engage with as well. Um, Definitely. Thank you very much, Organized Chaos. I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely, definitely. But you all jump on, like I said, jump on the page, jump on the channel, check out the music. Be prepared for Saturday because I'm gonna be back at you with more hip hop, more coverage, and more interesting topics for us to chime in on. But until then, it's the Left Fresh Podcast signing out. You all have a great weekend. All right.